my name is Aksik, aka Annika. Welcome to my channel, and here we mostly talk about adult coloring and art materials and all sorts of different techniques, and sometimes just about art and life. So I had a wonderful surprise a couple of weeks ago. Ohuhu contacted me and said that, we have noticed your videos, which is like, ooh, lovely. I was super chuffed about that. And would you be interested in trying out our markers? And I told them quite honestly that I have the full, pretty much full, I think, set of their Honolulu markers, which are the ones that I'm sure you are all familiar with. These are the Honolulu markers, and they come in two types. They come in brush end, brush tip, which is this brush here. And there's two variants of other end. Some of them come in fine tip, and some of them, let me see if I can find it for you quickly, because I have very few of these. Okay, yeah, some of them come in chisel tip. And to be honest, you learn as you go. I would have actually preferred if I had gotten them all in the chisel tip version, chisel and brush, obviously, because I kind of prefer chisel to the fine, but this is not a subject of this video. Let's not go to the side tangents. There's quite enough here to talk about. So I said, but I would be interested in trying out their new types of alcohol markers, which is this one, which is Honolulu Plus, which has the superior brush tip. And also they have, quickly show you the packaging, but I'm not going to talk about these in this video. These are the soft chisel ones, which have a brush tip and a soft chisel. It's a kind of a different style of a chisel. It has kind of, the shape is different. You can see kind of tapers like this here. It gives much more, many more ways to kind of create lines with it, and it also allows you to blend when you are, when you want kind of maximum ink output, which is what chisels are good for. Chisels give you the max ink output. So, anyways, I asked, would they be okay if I did that? And they were, yeah, you can do that. So they sent me, and I got them kind of beginning of this week. And this is now Sunday, and I haven't really gotten anywhere this week. I've been wrecked and busy, and getting a bit better health-wise, and then getting kind of back to not very great. It's kind of fluctuating, but never mind that. I am finally here, sitting talking about this. It's fairly late on Sunday night, but let's try to stay coherent. So, what is in here? Firstly, the packaging itself, compared to, they kind of like to make it obvious that this is a bit of an upgrade, or this is kind of a more supreme and a bit more expensive marker. The packaging also looks a bit more upmarket. These are the usual little black bags that pretty much everybody knows of, kind of a canvas material. These are the bags that pretty much all the Ohuhu markers are coming in. And this one has this, it looks like vegetarian leather type of a thing, this pleather, soft, off-white, and the zip is white. Even the zip, kind of a tab itself, is slightly fancier than the other ones. So yeah, the kind of, if you open it, it already kind of feels a bit more upmarket. And why, do you ask, do we need these nibs, or why are these nibs in any way different? I'm sure you've heard about these ones before, and I'm just adding my 5 cents here. But let's talk about it anyway. Since you're here, you know, might be interested. So, these markers come with, firstly, let's talk about, you know, the regular Ohuhu Honolulu markers. They have actually decent brush nib, reasonably flexible, you know, considering it's not a rubber nib, and you know, totally okay for blending. You can do a decent job with it, and it has this shape. Okay, and now the Honolulu Plus has a new, and this is, from what I know, okay, is a nylon tip. So that this is kind of flexible nylon fibers. This tip is made of, the regular Honolulu. And this is now rubber tip. And rubber tip is way more, quite a bit more expensive to produce and to install than kind of those nylon fiber tips, which are kind of prevalent in all the budget markers. So these ones can't by default be super cheap because the nib itself is quite dear. It is essentially the same type of a nib as Copics have. I took Copic sketch out because I kind of tried to match the colors for those 3 markers, and the color that matched the best with these 2, which is BV414 in Honolulu Plus, and it's called Denim Blue. And on regular Honolulu, it's B270 Vivid Blue, which is funny enough because I swear to you, these 2 are identical colors. I can show you later on a paper. It's the same color. And the closest color I found, which is, you know, pretty darn close, in Copic was B95, and yeah, they don't really, I don't think that one, yeah. So basically, these ones look, if you put them next to each other, the nibs, Copic Sketch and Copic Chow, this is the Chow, and this is the Sketch marker. Sketch marker has a different shape. It's kind of more oval. If you look at the top, it's an oval shaped. Feels slimmer in your hand. Ohuhu is kind of chunkier and rounder, and the Chow markers are also round but slimmer than Ohuhu markers. So if you look at the nibs next to each other, I'm going to take a piece of paper maybe, so it bring you close, so maybe you have a bit better, yeah, kind of background, so it would focus better. Like, these nibs are essentially identical, or very, very close. As I said, Copic Chow and Copic Sketch essentially have the same nib, so there's no difference there. And what is the benefit of a rubber nib is that rubber nib is more flexible. I kind of filmed some material, kind of shots of how much more the rubber nib flexes, or how much more it kind of bounces back than Honolulu regular. This is now the brush nib of the Ohuhu Honolulu regular brush marker, and you can see it's a nylon tip. There is some softness and flexibility to it, that is true, but you can see that only the tip, like the flexes, and it does lose the shape a bit if you do it with the force like I was doing there, and it takes a bit time to get back into the shape. This is now a Copic Chow marker. The nib is different shape, it has kind of a bit fatter belly, and you can see how this one flexes and how it bounces back after you pretty much press it fully into the paper. So it is more controllable. You can see it goes really all the way. And the next one is now the Ohuhu Honolulu Plus brush marker, so the new nib one, and you can see the nib looks almost identical to Copic nib, and it also bends pretty much identically. You know, has the same flexibility. You can see very clearly there now. This is how well it bends, and it bounces back the same way. To me, these two nibs, you know, Copic nibs, Sketch and Chow have the same nibs, and Ohuhu Honolulu Plus are essentially identical. I cannot tell much of a difference between them. The shape is essentially the same, and they flex the same way. They feel almost identical. They really bounce back. So because of that, they are really nicer to blend with. You get smoother blends, and you can get away often with bigger jumps in your colors. Like, let's say you don't have very good, usually in markers you would need pretty good kind of a gradient to work with, you know, that if you want a good blend, you need to have, let's say, 3 or 4 colors that go in gradient. Whereas often, not now, I'm not saying that it's easy, but it is easier to blend with kind of rougher jumps in kind of rubber tips. They are just better at blending because of the shape of the brush. You can see how sharp that tip is. I hope now you can see in the background of my hand how sharp it is. And these ones hold their shape. Like my Copics, okay, they are good 15 years old, all right? And I can tell you they have never been, I don't think I've maybe switched a couple of nibs in all that time. Granted, they have pretty much stood without using for almost 10 years. But during that 5 years I did use them, I used them extensively, daily and heavily. And the nibs just stand up to a lot of abuse. Many people love Ohuhu regular tips because you can switch them. Like, you know, if this one, those nylon nibs eventually get pretty frayed at the tip, especially, you know, if you try to do heavy blending and work on a bit rougher paper, those tips get frayed. Of course, you know, the marker that I actually have in my hand at the moment is not particularly frayed. Let me see if I can find something that is pretty. I have sadly just kind of freshened up my Ohuhu tips. The ones that were frayed I had kind of worked over, so I probably can't, you know, find you anything that is really rough at the moment. You know, it doesn't really matter. Here you can slightly see that it's starting to go, but I don't think it's visible to the camera. Anyway, they get frayed, and then you're able to pull it out and switch it around because the other end is exactly the same as this. So that kind of lengthens their life quite a bit. And, you know, you don't have to buy a new nib immediately. So that's really economical. But even then, considering, you know, if you use them heavily and if you use them in the books, the likes of do the blending in Amazon books or the likes of it, which have pretty rough paper, those nibs will wear down pretty fast. Now, I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I'm just, you know, talking about my experience. And the fact of the matter is that the rubber nib just lasts for bloody ever. Yes, you can also, you know, kill these if you're really rough with them, and eventually they will get, if you work them really heavily, they get too flexible or too squishy. You know, they just don't bounce back the same way anymore. They start losing the shape eventually, but that takes a lot of time and a lot of abuse. So these nibs, rubber nibs, are really great. And if Ohuhu is able to offer a range of these with kind of sensible prices, they're never going to be super economical, you know, the rubber nib markers, because the nib itself just is more expensive. But, you know, from what I can see at the moment, if they come in the set, they are under €2 for one kind of rubber nibbed, you know, brush marker. That is a very good price, you know. But these ones I only really suggest to you if you are actually doing blending. If you just use your alcohol markers as, let's say, you use them in the color by number books, or you use them just as basing tools, then these ones, you know, just you put flat color down and then you go with pencils on top, then these ones are absolutely sufficient. The regular Ohuhu brush markers. I always, of course, you know, suggest brush markers, because they're just faster, they're easier, they're more pleasant to use, the color goes down smoother. So I would still say, you know, if you buy Ohuhu markers, or, you know, any alcohol markers, buy the ones with the brush. But if you don't do kind of alcohol marker effects or much blending with them, even if you do just a, you know, kind of very basic blending, you know, a little bit, maybe one color to other, you know, fairly close ones, I don't think that those rubber nibbed ones are now particularly needed. If, you know, you can try them out as an experience, and maybe you just love them so much that, you know, you want to have all rubber tips. But the thing about that also is that at the moment, they only have, I think there's supposed to be eventually 400 or something colors. It said that in the, okay, it comes with this little booklet. Let me see. Okay, it did say about how many colors there was. Yeah, they don't say yet, you know, how many colors. I think I saw somewhere them saying that it's going to be, you know, the plan is something like 400 something colors. Maybe I'm lying to you. Maybe I misinterpreted some info somewhere, but in my head I remember this. But at the moment, there's only 2 sets. And what kind of annoyed me a bit is that to me, there's only 2 ways to do if you go kind of, you know, smaller set, bigger set. Either you do it the way that you have, let's say, 24 set, and all the 24 colors are going to be in a bigger set plus the new colors. Or you have basically 24 set, and the next set is totally different colors, and you keep topping up colors as you buy those numbered sets, which, you know, kind of makes sense as well. And I kind of like that, because, you know, this way you can buy sets that, you know, you don't have to buy to get. Let's say you have a small set or kind of small-ish set, but you want them all. You don't have to then rebuy, you know, loads of them. But in this, it's kind of done really weirdly that there's 36 markers in the set that I got here. And for that 36 set, the color is actually okay. I you know, there's quite a bit of options here. Although quite a lot of grays for, you know, relatively small set, you know, considering this is a 36 set, that's a lot of grays. But in 24 set, there are 6 colors that are actually overlapping with this set, which, you know, I really wish they would have had all different colors here, you know, that there wouldn't be overlap between these, because I'm saying it very quietly. No, nobody hears that. If you look at this 24 set and the colors, there are actually, quite a bit of things that fit in between colors here. So I ended up going and getting myself the 24 set as well, because I really like the blendability of these now. If I do work with alcohol markers, I often do want to kind of do proper blending, and proper playing with them. And those nibs are a joy to work with. As I said, once again, you absolutely, do not need them badly. But I can just show you very quickly, okay? Here I did I was just kind of testing and kind of playing and pushing them down, and I did do kind of a hair, and both of those kind of tufts of hair, okay, are done with just one marker. And you can see how much thinner or how much slimmer line you can get with rubber nib. This is done now with rubber nib, and this is done with regular nylon fiber nib, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It actually comes, looks all right, but it does not get as slim as this. So you're able to do the effects like grass and hair and that sort of a thing. Like, I really like flick method and flick coloring with alcohol markers, flick blending, or just creating textures. And with rubber tip markers, it is easier. So if that is something you like to do, then it's worth trying them out. But at the moment, yes, the color choices are still on scarce side. So it's more so kind of, if you want them to become popular and expand that range, then people need to obviously buy them and show that there is interest. So if you are kind of interested in them, kind of expanding that line, I suspect it depends on how many people are actually buying the kind of a introductory introductory set, yes. So yeah, I think it's a really worthy endeavor. I hope that they will expand that line, because I don't know if you can bring you closer. This is now. So this is your regular Honolulu. This is Honolulu Plus, and this is Copic marker, and they are essentially the same color, although they're all called different names. And once again, if I just try to make very, very slim line, I essentially have to keep regular Honolulu really upright, because if I have it a little bit tilted, it's almost impossible to get very kind of a slim lines. The same goes for rubber nib ones as well. You can't really do it sideways, although you can do a bit more. If I want to get really slim lines, you have to hold it really upright, and it's not very controllable. Like, you have to basically graze paper with it, and even then it can be tricky to get very thin, very slim lines, which, as I said, mostly you would be using for hair, for fur, for grass, for, all sorts of textures, or just going into details. So that's one thing. Then this is now the Honolulu Plus, and you can see I don't have to do this. I can get a slim line or thin line, and it's much more controllable. In a way, it feels it's more bouncy, but it feels firmer, but bouncy and flexible. It's all about control. This is a softer nib. And I feel that there's less control. Well, it's not just my feeling. There is less control. It's less controllable. How your line comes out, where it goes, the thickness of the line, the way you can kind of just change the thickness of the line or vary the thickness of the line. They are genuinely easier to control. And this is now, and tell me that this is not essentially the same color. Okay, let me put swatches next to each other. This kind of really, well, there is a little bit of difference maybe, but very similar. And they're not the same name, so there must be a difference, but yeah, to a naked eye, essentially the same. And this is now the Copic Chow, and this was the closest color that I could find. This is why I said took Chow. This is, and the same story. You can see very similar color. And this nib has seen a lot of use. This is possibly one of those rubber nibs that would have benefited of changing. But even then, it's more controllable. You can get slimmer line easier. You can graze, you can go thicker, and you can pull it. It's just cleaner. So yeah, I am an enthusiast of a rubber nib in alcohol markers, but I also acknowledge that it is not needed for all of us colorists, okay? It is genuinely only needed if you do alcohol marker coloring. Pretty much either you do the full page, you know, full everything shading the alcohol markers, or at least do a lot of work with them, you know, kind of that you don't just put down flat base, or you don't just throw down maybe, you know, kind of two color gradient. So yeah, they're great. Also, another thing that is kind of positive for colorists, especially if you're working on thinner or paper that tends to bleed, the regular nylon markers, this is now my experience, but in my experience they are wetter. That if, you know, especially if they are now juicy and full, which Ohuhu markers tend to be when they come, they feel genuinely, they just feel wetter, they feel more juicy, because that nib, I suspect, just lets out more ink at the same time. Whereas one of the reasons, you know, these ones, the rubber nibs, are more controllable is that the ink output is slightly less. I'm not saying it's drier, it is juicy as well, but it's not as wet. And because of that, it is a little bit less likely to bleed. Or not, well, it still will bleed, but it doesn't, you know, you can control the bleeding a bit better, you know, on your nastier papers like Amazon paper. Because I had kind of forgotten about it, and when I first got them and I started kind of trying them, they felt, you know, that they weren't very juicy, and it's like, what is going on? But then I remembered, and, you know, like, let's test it out with the chisel end, because that's how you can tell if it's full or not. And you put the chisel down and the ink just flows, you know, oodles of it. So yeah, they are full, they are juicy. It's just the nib deposits the ink differently, so don't be put off by that. This is just how a rubber nibs work. Now I thought to swatch these markers on camera as well, maybe put it onto the kind of a speed swatching, but what happened was that, you know, I had swatched them onto the little swatch in the one that comes in the actual box, and I was not particularly excited about how they had positioned them here. There's like random greens in the middle of other colors and stuff like this. This seems to be a repeating theme with Ohuhu sweatshirts. You know, one thing that kind of was like, why can't they just put them into rainbow order? Why? It just doesn't make sense, you know. I don't know, somebody just randomly takes them and just whatever, you know. Those are all the marker names, just put them in the row and that's what they do. I don't know. Anyways, I thought that I would get a chart on Etsy that, you know, would have all the colors. And, you know, usually if you get a chart from Etsy, they have put them into rainbow order, because, you know, that would be the point, in my opinion. And I got a chart on Etsy, and then I realized that they are in the same order that they are here, which kind of defeats the purpose for me. But hey, let's put into the kind of a speed swatching, and maybe, you know, I'll say a couple of words as I go, but yeah, it's not really going to be a great chart, will it? No. On top of everything else, I printed this chart at work and I didn't really have marker paper there. So this is fairly absorbent, thirsty paper, which isn't really great for alcohol markers. But hey, we see the colors and that's the main thing. One of the reasons I wanted bigger swatches like that is sometimes color, especially for markers like that, you know, when I'm trying different layers, it's easier to see and perceive if the swatches are a bit bigger than the tiny ones in the actual little bags they come in. And as you can see, the yellow line at the top is pretty good, except the last one would be now hard to blend in the cherry wood, but it is possible. The next line here, the creamy peach, works very nicely for skin. You can layer it on top of each other if you want to do fairly kind of a subtle blending. It's not really blending, it's essentially layering. But then, you know, camel also works for skin shadows. Pale moss could be used as a neutralizer in skin, actually, because, you know, it is kind of muted green with kind of this mixed muted you know, peachy color. It would work as a neutralizer, I think. Ballet pink is another kind of a color that would work for skin. Now, for some reason, whenever I work on the left side of the screen, it just goes out of the focus. I did try to kind of position my hand several multiple interesting ways, and it did not work out for me, so I apologize for that. So yeah, you can see here, you know, as I go along, what colors they are, and it would have been, of course, much better if I had just maybe done the chart myself and put them into at least some sort of a logical order for myself. I was showing that I like the cobalt blue better than deep royal blue. I prefer kind of a cooler blues to kind of red leaning blues. Yeah, there's for example, the Tahitian blue and process blue, now the one that I'm doing here now, they on the swatch look like they're good blending colors, and they are, but they actually blend, if you blend them into each other, they're very similar, you know. It's almost like would have wanted a little bit bigger jump, maybe, but possibly not. Greens blend kind of usually just well, you know. It's usually fairly easy to blend greens, and there's quite a few options here for a small set like that, but of course a lot of color choices in this set have essentially gone for grays. There are a lot of grays for a small set like that. At the same time, I do understand that they wanted a good selection of grays in this new range, because you do use like I would use gray alcohol markers in coloring if I'm doing it with markers, more than I would use them with pencils, for example. I can do kind of underpainting with them often when I put the shadows down. I will show that actually in my demonstration how I do that, and then kind of glaze colors on top if it's limited palette like that. And in this palette there's fair few kind of a lighter colors that would allow me to do that, you know, selection of them. So yeah, it's not bad actually, you know. You can do pretty decent shading with this one, but yeah, I would have preferred that the order would have been a bit different in this chart. So what do I think? Well, there are some blending opportunities here, but I do seriously think that if you want them, you know, to be your blending markers, and you just decide, okay, I am going to buy alcohol markers and those are going to be the alcohol markers I buy, then you really do need the 2 sets of them, although there's 6 overlapping, which yeah, that's not great. But for example, for skin colors, it seems to be there's more choices here, you know, especially if you combine the 2 sets together, you get probably, you know, easier result. One thing that is kind of missing for me is kind of mid or palish pink that isn't kind of as pale as that. For example, for, you know, tomato is a bit too red. You know, if you want to do kind of blush or kind of blood under the skin effects, it can be done if you kind of layer things and pick up color from another marker with this marker, but it's hard to control. So yeah, that could be a bit rough, and it doesn't seem to be a great option here either. But I think, you know, if the 2 sets are together, there's more opportunities. For example, the blue greens here, the barely any in this case, but there's pretty nice kind of a blending set here in the other set, and there's additional greens that would sit nice between other greens here. So what is in this set, you know, what I think, you know, some examples, you know, blending wise, how do they blend? Okay, so let's go with skin. There's really quite few options here. You can of course do the bases with gray, and there's many different kind of opportunities, but let's put something down. Okay, there's these 3 markers. That is probably what you would be mostly using if you just put kind of soft skin down with this set. So there's Camel, which is E47, there's Ballet Pink, which is R22, and there's YR34, which would be pretty much, you know, kind of the main skin color, or the closest to the skin color of these 3. And once again, you know, you put something down. I'm just showing it kind of randomly. Usually I wouldn't put as dark color down. And then this one was now the creamy peach, and this is Camel, which you can use for doing skin shadows, which is very easy to blend out with the creamy peach. And if you want to cool down the shadows, you can take the Arctic Blue. Sorry, this is wrong blue I have in my hand here. I need the Arctic Blue. Yeah, Arctic Blue, which is BV35. And you can kind of, you know, if you feel that the skin shadows are too warm with Camel, and then you can put the creamy peach on top, and you get, in my opinion, better skin shadows with that one here, you know, if you just have these markers. And also, you know, you can of course, you know, this one was fairly dark, but if you just want to take the creamy peach and just layer it for shadows, because you can do that as well, you don't have to vary markers as well. You can just add layering with this, some darker parts, and then blend it out very gently, but not totally, with Ballet Pink. And then Ballet Pink in highlight areas, blend out with colorless marker, so you essentially have white highlights and have this really pale skin, and the creamy peach would be the shadows. Please take into account that the moment you see everything darker, the markers are still wet, they will dry, and they will look obviously lighter. because that's what happens. It's like watercolors in a way. It happens with alcohol markers as well, that they lighten, and the blend also smoothes out a bit as they dry, or it's not really drying, alcohol evaporates essentially. And then what other kind of things? Oh, I wanted to show you that, you know, there's quite a bit of a jump here, as you can see. This to me is kind of, I think it's possible to do with an island brushes as well, but I have always found that easier with rubber tips or rubber brushes. The kind of and to me, the rubber brushes, you know, there are quite a few brands that have them, Winsor & Newton markers, and there's quite a few of them around. They're usually way more expensive, but you can see how much darker this is. There are quite a few of them around, but you know, there's different shapes, there's different flexibility kind of levels. Some of them are super soft and almost impossible to control. Some of them are, you know, quite hard. So yes, and this is now, of course, you know, that sort of a blend, you know, if you do really harsh ones like this, you do need good paper. You know, this is kind of my good old blending card from ancient times when I was doing a lot of stamping. So this card accepts markers, and, you know, markers blend on it real well. But you can see, and especially if it dries now, but, you know, these two, how big gap there was, and they wouldn't even be possibly, you know, yeah you could, but you would have several tones in between them. You would never usually blend those two together, but with good brushes and decent paper, you can pretty much blend anything. So as I've said, I've tried many different markers and quite a few different rubber tip brush markers as well. And they all have had different brushes, as I described, you know, some more flexible, some harder, some softer. These Honolulu Plus ones, to me, are one of the closest and most similar to Copics that I have come across. Even if you look at them next to each other, you know, I just pulled out random Copic sketch here. Look at the shape and the size, you know, even the size is similar. Maybe Copic nib is slightly slimmer, but not much. You can see them here. The shape is the same, you know, they have this kind of a chubby belly, and then they sharpen very suddenly at the end, but the tip is very sharp. It's really nice and sharp and super easy to blend with and create different, you know, shapes and strokes with. So yeah, I think they're really similar to Copics. I wasn't really expecting to like them as much as I did. So are we going to try some other? Oh, okay, as far as blends go, I don't think I even need to show you that, you know, this one is essentially a really good blend. You are going to be able to gold really well. This one can be added at the end of this blend very easily. Although these two, for example, if you just put down the orange, which is marigold, okay, it's quite bright orange, and you put onto it melon yellow. Where are you, melon yellow? Okay, that totally works. It's kind of a darkening color for the orange. And did you see how easily things blend? Once again, you know, it needs to dry and such, and you know, it was super fast and I didn't really work back and forth like I usually would. I would deepen my blend several times, but these two, you know, sit on each other real well. Then tomato, which is basically the only red in the set. Basically primary red. Then you can take cherry wood. Where is the cherry wood? Have I lost the markers already? No, here it is. I'm just blind. Cherry wood. And it works, of course, even better if you do kind of a flick blending. But you can totally blend like this as well. And there you go. So you don't need another dark red. You can just use kind of a reddish brown to shade it. It's kind of need to be creative. If you have limited set like this, you just have to think outside the box, you know, try greens. For example, take your tomato, put a little bit of it down, and take a complementary of some sort. Let's find something fairly light so I wouldn't overdo it. So yellow, green, honeydew, melon. It's too light. It's just going to push the side away. Okay, sea green maybe. All right. Okay, I need to deepen the tomato. Wrong color. Sorry. Not my day. Okay, let's put new red down. Let's start from the beginning. Okay. So this is sea green. And then we're gonna go over it with red again several times. And we get really nice dark shading. Then we're going to go over the red. And look how dark, nice shading you get with just one color. So kind of, yeah, you have to be kind of creative with this. You also have to be working on the paper that doesn't bleed hugely to try these blends, because you need to put down quite a lot of ink to be able to push things around like this. But yeah, definitely, you know, things are doable. But yeah, more colors would be, you know, badly anticipated. Okay, so I'll see if I can maybe do a little bit of a sample coloring, and then we'll call it a day or evening or night even. Okay. I thought we'll work on something in this little book, which has really nice paper for alcohol markers and also kind of very suitable art for alcohol markers. It's a nice stitch bound book, very smooth paper. And I thought I did something like that when I got them first. You know, I tried out how the blending goes with this little fishy here. Of course, I didn't write down what grays did I use. So let's do something. I have something already behind the paper. Keep that in mind, especially if you plan to do things pretty heavily blended. And I will start with cashmere gray, which is BGY 100. So cashmere gray. And I'm going to put the kind of a first ideas of shadows down. I'm not really kind of doing full blending or anything yet. I'm just thinking with my marker where I'm going to put the shadows. So there's going to be dip here because the body goes dip there. There's going to be shadows here. Oh, that here, and there's always going to be shadow, of course, here. This is just me kind of drawing the first sketch of shadows. And I'm only doing it for the lower part of the body at first, because I'm pretty much leaving the middle, at least at first, like in here. I might add color to it, but I didn't put any color in the middle as I was blending. So I'm going to go there, and I think there's going to be a dip there, and it's going to be shadow there. So there's also going to be shadow here and here. Okay. And I'm leaving the top without shadow. There's going to be extra deep shadow there. And I'm also going to put something on here. So this little dip there, and I'm going to create tiny shadow here, like this. And then I'm going to leave a bit of a reflective light. I hope the markers don't bleed in there. If they do, that's fine, but I'm leaving tiny bit of reflected light at the moment there. So, and to keep it, I'm just going over the edges of this marker with the colorless blender when they're still fresh, to soften the edge a bit. I can do that later on, you know, with more vigor. But at the moment, I'm just going to make sure that it doesn't become too permanent. And then I am going to take something darker, which in this case seems to be storm gray. Is it? Let's see. Yeah, it's storm gray. So that's GG12. Yep. So that's quite a bit actually darker. Usually you would have a bit of a step in between. But we don't have that step, and that's fine. We'll work with it. And I'm now going to essentially go over almost most of the area that I shadowed, but not quite all of it, with this darker marker, which, as I said, is storm gray. Bringing it up. There's a dip there, but I'm not going to go totally up. I'm just going to go now, and here, this dip here, I'm just going to go like this little almost triangle into that dip, and I'm going to go over so that reflective light would be slightly preserved. Actually, I can bring this one down because there's not going to be much of reflective light here. Okay, so this should be pretty much okay. I'm adding some shadow here, and now I'm taking the initial color, which was the cashmere gray, and I'm going to soften the edges of the darker color, which was what? Slate gray, yeah? And maybe bringing it even a little bit upward, depending, you know, how strong of a shadow do I want. And I do want a bit of a shadow here as well. Softening it like this. Okay. And once again, I'm going to soften the edges here with colorless blender. you don't have to be very precise about it. Just, you know, go over the very edge of the, at the moment, don't go into the dark areas with it, just the edge, where it's supposed to kind of blend into the dark. Here I need to kind of work a bit. This is too harsh. Okay, and I have one more gray that I don't know how this is going to work for me. It's called Storm Gray, BGY24, and that's the darkest of them. So I'm adding extra shadow here where I want some extra darkness. So I want it here underneath the chin, but I want to kind of disappear into that. I want it here, the gills, which are pretty, I want pretty strong shadow there. And I want it here. And here where the tail is also, I'm going up with a bit of a triangle again, and of darkening that bit here. Darkening the under bit of the tail. And here where the tail dips in, I'm also going to give some extra shadow there. Oops, I went too far. Well, it is what it is. I'm going to go with it. Too late to change anything. Sometimes just go with the flow, you know. If your hand slips a bit, well, just declare it deliberate. And here as well, I want, but I don't want, actually I will do it darker. So, and now I'm going to go back with the next darkest again. And basically the first layer you do is essentially you are creating wet area with a bit of a blend. And then I'm going now back over. I'm going from darkest to lightest now. And I'm polishing now all the blends. Whilst, you know, also haven't created darker shadows. So this is now the polishing bit as far as the blends go. So I'm going over all the darkest areas, a little bit upward from them. You can be reasonably as bold as you want or as delicate as you want with shadows. This is what I'm doing essentially. I'm giving this fishy, whatever it is. It doesn't look kind of a dolphin-y, but is it a dolphin? Kind of. I think it's a dolphin. I'm giving it a shape essentially. So I'm going to make sure that there's, yeah, shape here. And now I'm taking the lightest marker, which was once again Cashmere Gray, BGY00. And I'm trying not to go into the darkest areas with it, because if I'm going over darkest areas with it, I am going to push the darker color away and going to lighten them. So I want to preserve the shadow, so I'm only going over. At first I need as a base, you know, to get everything wet so things would blend better. But now I'm just going over the edge where the previous, you know, color ends. So I put the slate gray there. So I'm softening the edges of the slate gray with Cashmere Gray essentially. Now, and here as well, bringing it up. So everything is soft. I'm also going to put a little bit of it, because I think of the belly as being pretty light. So I'm going to put a little bit of it there as well. And now I'm grabbing the colorless blender and going over just the edge between white and that cashmere gray, the last color, with the colorless blender. So basically I am trying to soften the transition into the white. So at the moment it kind of doesn't look as clean because it's still wet, you know, and there's a bit of a darkness there. But trust me, once it all dries and settles, it's going to look all right. So just going over the edge, but only in the areas where I actually want transition from gray to white, because in some places I want to be, like for example here I want pretty sharp place because the body is curving and there's going to be dark shadow there. Okay, so now I also need to do the upper part of the body, and I need to turn the paper now because otherwise it's just not right, you know, my hand, how my hand moves and flicks. So once again I am going to, okay, so the curve goes there, so I am creating the curve of its body, and I'm leaving this bit white, but I'm going to create some shadows here on the back fins. Are they fins? I think the fins. Is that the word? Okay, so I gave these shapes now, and now I'm going to go in there and kind of shape it a little, you know, what shadow I want there to be. I think it's going to, oh, I went too much into the, okay, and this back fin as well. Give them a bit of a shadow, and I'm going to go and soften once again the edges with colorless blender. I don't really have any other options, but I kind of want to leave them. I might want to add some colors to them, and therefore I don't want the whole thing to be gray. I'm just creating shadows with gray here. Okay, and now I need a darker one. So I need this. This is once again, sorry, it's a wrong marker I took. I wanted slate gray. Yeah, slate gray. So that's GG12, and I'm going to create, so I want this bit to have darker area here, and here as well. No. Yeah. And I'm going to put down now, those are slightly smaller areas, and I'm working in less areas, so things stay pretty wet. So I'm going to go in right away now with the darkest. I'm not going to do several steps here, and I'm going to put the darkest only in the corner like this. Here I leave a bit of a reflected light, but I will create a corner that has a sharper shadow like this. And you can see how easy it is to flick into nothingness. And now I'm taking the slate gray again, which is GG12. I'm going to go over the edge of the darkest color to soften that. Here as well. And here we take the cashmere gray, which is the, Yeah, I think I did that one with warm grays, and this one is no cool grays. So those two fish, that's actually cool. I think it's works well that one fish has cool shadows and one has warmer shadows. They don't look identical. Okay, I'm softening all the shadows there. And I might maybe bring, should I bring the shadows in a bit more here? No, I don't think I'm going to do much more there. And then I'm taking the Colorless Blender again, and I'm going to make sure that this transition area is going to be relatively smooth. Okay, and now I'm taking my lightest color, and you know, it looks a bit boring the way it is. So what I'm going to do now is to go starting in the darkest areas. I'm making quite a lot of dots, like here in the darkest areas, some of them bigger, some of them tiny, and I'm bringing them up into the body, the full body like this. But I'm making sure that there's more of them in the darker areas where there's shadows. Just giving it a bit of a texture. So here, and some of them, you know, make some deliberately quite big and some barely touch the paper, so they wouldn't be uniform. That's, and also, you know, don't cluster them or try to fight your brain that wants everything in patterns. Try to randomize it a fair bit, but you know, keep it constantly in mind that there's going to be more of them. You know, keep the most of them in the area where there's already shadows. So this is kind of the first layer of them. We do several layers, and it really helps the fish, the dolphins, look more fun and interesting. Eventually, you know, when everything is finished and all the colors are down, you could, of course, add some white dots as well eventually to almost make it glitter. But this is not really what I want to do. I basically just want to hint at this texture of the skin. So they wouldn't be super smooth, kind of bent cylinders instead of actual, you know, looking like a creature. Okay, so slate gray. So that's a GG12. And we're going in with darker spots. And now with these ones, keeping them mostly, some of them bigger, some of them smaller, you know, I'm making some pretty big, but now we're keeping them closer to the shaded areas. We take some into the body as well, but not very much. Keep it random. But on the shaded areas, we, you know, put down quite a lot of them. We want that texture there. And then if you have any imperfections in your blending as well, you know, that is going to help a lot with hiding it essentially. Although, you know, it came out pretty smooth at the moment, but you know, sometimes, especially if there's big jumps, you know, between the colors and stuff like this, you know, it can be rough at places. So this is a really good method of kind of hiding the rough spots. Okay, and keeping them where, mostly where there's shaded areas, but yeah, bringing some odd ones up as well, so it wouldn't look horribly out of balance, you know. So there's still hints of texture in the main areas of the body as well. Shen, please. My dog has just decided that she wants something and she doesn't really know what she wants, but you know. Shen, will you go please sit on the couch and be chill? I know. Good girl. All right. She actually listened. Wow. Okay, and now the last color, which is Storm Gray, which is BGY24, but just darker gray. Once again, you don't have to do that with Ohuhu markers. You don't have to do that, or if you do it with Ohuhu markers, they don't have to be the Honolulu Plus markers, but having a flexible rubber tip and very controllable flexible rubber tip helps, you know, if you do blends like this that are pretty harsh. Especially if you see, you know, I pretty much went from pretty dark gray to nothing. Having a good, and this darkest marker now I'm keeping only to the darkest shaded areas and maybe take 1 or 2 little dots, you know, somewhere. My plan is to put, you know, on those patterns or whatever stripes, I'll probably put metallic watercolor under these eventually. Not yet. Not after I've decided if I'm going to leave them gray or if I'm going to give them some color as well. So I'm just, yeah, you can see. So now some extra texture, and you know, take into consideration if it looks a bit harsh, you know, those dots are very visible, they're quite dark. It will lighten as it dries. Shen, what's up with you? I think she wants to come up to sit on my lap, and that's not really working well for me at the moment. Okay, and here, and I'm adding some extra light dots, just, you know, kind of, and I'm dabbing quite aggressively here, just to soften some areas where there's loads of dark dots. I'm going to give some dabbing with the lightest marker, which is the cashmere gray in this case, but could be any, you know, very light gray. You know, you're not limited to these colors. You can take any 3 grays essentially and the colorless blender and do this. Okay, and colorless blender, just, you know, softening the gray on the belly as well. And there you go, the shadows are down. Actually, now that I'm looking at the gills, I forgot to soften the shadows here on the gills. I'm doing it with the wrong marker. I was wondering why things aren't getting better but getting worse. Okay. So I'm going with cashmere gray in there and slightly kind of lightening and softening them. And then colorless blender, just pulling it out like this, just to soften it slightly. And I'm putting the grays away now. So are we going to put any colors onto the fishes? So there's possibly pink and Arctic blue. Will we try to do something with Arctic blue and pink? We'll see how it works out for us. So now we're just going to add a bit of color. So I'm going to go over everything here in the dark areas with Arctic blue. And I'm not going to go over much with the darkest areas because it's a very light color, and if I go over too much, I'm going to just kill the shading. I'm going to just lighten everything. So I'm going very gently, but I'm bringing it out a fair bit. So here's all. Just very, very gently, one time over the lightest area and then bringing it up. Oops, I went too overboard here. Well, we'll see how this is going to work for me. Okay. And all right. I think I should bring it more up. Yeah. Okay, and here I'm creating a ridge. Okay, and okay, so that was Atlantic blue, and now I'm taking Ballet pink, and I'm starting from the edge of the Arctic blue, and I'm going to just flicks like this. See, this is the beauty of the rubber tip now. I can flick things. So I'm going to bring it up here. So my main concern at the moment is just the edge areas. I'm just kind of very, very softly. Don't go all the way into the blue, then you're just getting rid of the blue. But a little bit into the blue so you would get this bit of a transition there. And now we're making sure that our pink is nice and even. And here as well. The nose. Maybe a little bit. Creating kind of a more purplish area here. And here as well. I'm actually making it, yeah, purplish here because... And... I'm now getting it totally, I'm making now even color of pink on the body up to there. I don't know if I'm going to leave it like that yet, but I'm bringing it pretty much to the extent of whole body. And of course the texture stays as it is. And here I'm going to go over it again. So as you can see, I'm glazing essentially with alcohol marker. And on the fins, a hint of pink, a hint of pink, just a little bit into the blue, and with flicks like this. The values are almost the same between these two. So if I just give a couple of flicks, don't heavily blend it into other, because you're just going to push the blue away or just change the color. So flick it into the blue. And here I'm making sure I have this fairly narrow area at the top. I might actually change the color here to more purplish. Now. And now I'm taking a lemon chiffon. Okay, and just putting it in a couple of places, just for funsies. And here as well. And I went a bit too aggressive here in a couple of places. I warmed up the pink almost too much, but that's fine. It's just color variations, won't hurt. And here, just a couple of flicks. And here, a couple of flicks. I'm not going much into the pink, just to the very edge, very, very gently. Okay, and I'm adding some Arctic blue here, the reflected light area. Okay, and now the body there as well. I'm running with yellow over here. And I can keep playing now with, you know, adding colors, blending them into each other, playing with the color variations. The shape is already there, so I don't have to change or worry about that. Now I'm just glazing the colors on. So let me see if I can add some blue in some places, kind of strengthen the blue. Just play with the shape, strengthen some colors. If you feel that some areas are getting too warm, cool them down. You know, place things on top of each other. And if you flick like this, you know, you don't have to do the whole area. You can see I'm just flicking the color in. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm flicking some extra color in here. Now, I think I might leave it at that and maybe add some extra dots, because some of the dots now, because, oops, I should add something here. I forgot that I... And all of this kind of lightens and evens out eventually as it dries. So it will change. At the moment, everything looks a bit rough, but it does get better. So, and I'm going to now take the slate gray and add some more dots, because, you know, some of them became just too lost. But, you know, by adding extra texture there in some of the places where we put a lot of color in, once again, can help things to look a bit more even. And here we did color variations, but we can just as easily just put maybe 2 colors down, or, you know, 1 color down, and glaze, you know, glaze over so the fish wouldn't be essentially white. So we have all the shadows down. Here I'm just, you know, putting in more texture, and that helps a lot, I think. Here we go. And maybe some cashmere gray as well, to bring, you know, the dots more into the body, make some bigger dots as well. And eventually, you know, when everything is dried out, I will put some white dots in there as well. But at the moment, I'm keeping it essentially just, you know, the darker the gray dots. Because alcohol marker does need to dry as well before you put, you know, other stuff on top. You know, just leave it alone for maybe 10 minutes, and then you can go and add more. Okay. And here I've decided that I'm going to glaze the other dolphin as well, which might not have been the best decision, because my color choices weren't the greatest at the time. So I'm doing the cool shading, or kind of a cooler areas, darker areas. I'm going over them with the Arctic blue again. I'm trying to give a good bit of kind of cool shading, and then I am adding, I think it was called moss blue, moss green, and I am making a mistake here. You saw it there. I gave a totally wrong shape to the B kind of a highlight on the back. I just wasn't paying attention. I'm trying to change the shape now, but things aren't going well. So eventually I end up just going over everything with the Arctic Blue again to kind of change the tone altogether and get rid of the kind of a brighter highlights because they didn't come out great. So, you know, you can fix your boo-boos. You know, if things go a bit wrong, you can keep glazing and keep playing. One thing that will happen, you can see it now that it is happening, that as I'm going over and reglazing and reglazing the whole thing with the light marker, that my shading, the kind of the gray shading that was there before, is getting lighter and lighter because essentially I washing it out with the lighter marker. So at the end here you see I am adding gray again because all the kind of a deeper shadows were done. So I'm adding the deeper shadows in again and blending them out slightly with Arctic Blue this time because I already knew that this would be the color. And then I'm adding also the textures and the dots to give the character back to the little, you know, dolphin underneath here. Easy. Easy chippies. Okay, this was now, you know, longer than I planned it to be, but, you know, that's not a surprise. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you had okay time, and wishing you the best and have loads of really fantastic creative time, and bye-bye.